Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Unlocking Nature, a space where we share stories and discuss issues in conservation. And today we are going to talk about Wattled Crane. I am Sarah Malanga and I will be your host.
Okay, so moving on to tonight, we have a talk, two talks actually, and the overall title is Securing a Future for the Wattled Crane in South Africa. And this will be presented by Dr. Lara Fuller and Bishop Ngobeli. The wattled crane is one of Africa's most endangered bird species, and it faces mounting threats from habitat loss, wetland degradation, and human disturbance. These talks will explore current conservation efforts across their range, highlighting challenges, successes, and the critical role of habitat protection in securing the future of this iconic species. Our first speaker, Dr. Lara Fuller, is a leading voice in crane conservation. Her studies in the wattled cranes and her on-the-ground experience have given her a unique insight into the challenges and innovations required to protect these magnificent birds. And it is this that she will share with us. And Dr. Lara Fuller, Lara, please take the stage, and I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you very much.
I'm Dr. Lara Jordan Fuller. I'm the Johannesburg coordinator here for the African Crane Conservation Programme. I work within South Africa, and I work for the Endangered Wildlife Trust International Crane Foundation Partnership. I do have quite a mixed bag of knowledge, but I've been working with wattle cranes for about 17 years, and some of that has been field and some of that has been within the zoo environment. So I did work for a couple of decades in the zoo environment with different bird species. So I'm going to give an overall of the wattle crane conservation. Obviously, I've only been around 4 wattle cranes in the last 17 years, and the work has been going on for much, much longer. So the decline that was recorded started within the 1980s. And these are just an overview from the Population Habitat Viability Analysis of 2000. And you can see here that the birds in KwaZulu-Natal were about 220 breeding birds and 92 breeding birds in 1982. And I just need to explain the difference. We have what is called the floater flock. And the floater flock is a group of birds that are non-breeding. Some will be younger and some just will not breed at all. And so we often, when we talk about wattle cranes, we divide this because the breeding birds are very territorial to their nest sites. Just an important biological fact there. So overall, the global distribution is 9,600 estimated. The majority of these are living in the South Central floodplains. But the isolated populations of Ethiopia and South Africa, these populations are much smaller. And whereas the birds would wander through the South Central floodplains following water, in Ethiopia and South Africa, like I say, they're sedentary to their territories. They're highly competitive species. And you can see here that the stronghold of the wattle crane population in South Africa is focused around the Maloti Heritage Site in the foothills of the Drakensberg Mountains. There was formerly quite a large distribution, as you saw on the first slide, up into Mpumalanga, but this is much reduced today. So a quick overview of what came after the realization the decline occurred. First of all, 1985, Conservation Institute started. It then, in 1986, to better assess and census the species, the ringing and resighting program was initiated. Following that, the South African Working Group was formulated, and together they decided to do some releases of wattle cranes based in Mpumalanga. In 2001, the Population Habitat Viability Analysis was conducted to decide on a conservation plan going forward. And this led to the ex situ population being formed. Then a crane census and aerial surveys were started in 2003 and 2004. And in 2006, genetic research was conducted that discovered that the wattled cranes in South Africa were genetically distinct, but not a different subspecies. This was primarily work done so that the captive populations would understand how to manage the different birds from around the world, well, around Africa. In 2007, the successful hatching of a wattled crane chick occurred, and this was a great delight because no hatching in captivity had occurred before for the last 10 years at that point. A review of the wattled crane viability analysis was conducted, and this led to the discussions again of more releases. In 2014, a release facility was set up, and that had the first wattled crane chicks run through to look for any problems within that area. In 2016 to 19, we studied a transmitter project and put transmitters on wattled cranes to better understand some of the float-to-flock movements. That was part of my PhD. And then just last year, we did another population habitat viability analysis to further decide on which way, what directions we should go in. So now I'm just going to give an overview of key aspects that were learned along the way. The ex situ population was derived from second egg collections within the wild, and 5 partners worked together to safely remove second eggs that do not hatch, to hatch them in ex situ environment, and then those chicks were flown up to Johannesburg for rearing and release. This was part of the IUCN reintroduction. I think the management guidelines were called at that stage. And this was primarily to form an insurance population due to the low numbers of the wild population. From this, we also looked into the releases of the wattled cranes. The original releases in 1995 to 2000 of the 13 birds had really given great guidance on the processes that should be utilized for releasing wattled cranes successfully. And through all that work, they discovered that a release one-on-one for wattled cranes was the best approach for successful releases. If you release them in cohorts, then they were naive and they would fly around together but not be sure what they were doing. So these were the lessons taken away from those original releases. And in 2014, the costume rearing and rearing in a wetland was conducted in Nottingham Road in KZN. These releases, these led to 2 releases in this area, and both were successful in that they flew and were released successfully. And one of the 2 birds found a pair and mated and laid eggs in that first 2 years. These were also following the guidelines for the reintroduction. But as this work was going on, we did find that the number of birds in the wild through the aerial surveys, which I'll just go on to just now, there was actually an increasing population of the species. And in fact, we started to see anecdotal information that there might be some interest-specific competition. So there was some concern about continuing with releases at this stage. Oops. But I'd like to highlight some of the really important work that has been done between in situ and ex situ work. And that's specifically training field officers how to handle birds, where the greatest training can occur in zoos. And in addition, trialing transmitters within a captive environment is much better for the species, for the birds individually. And a number of transmitters have been trialed at Johannesburg Zoo for both the Zambia project and the Okavango Delta project. So ringing and reciting, all those years and those hard work have brought information to us that we can utilize within the PHVAs. And this graph on the top left shows us that the wattle cranes from ringing data did used to travel quite far. They've traveled even up to 500 kilometers. However, you see these 3 dots are only just a few, and those birds flew from Mpumalanga to KZN or vice versa. But the majority of the movement of the wattle cranes was actually only 200 kilometers. And this relates to the regional migration between the Midlands near Howick and across to Cedarville, just over the border into the Eastern Cape. The ringing data also gave us a great deal of information on survival. So survival was worked from once a bird was rung, which occurs during 8 to 12 weeks. Those birds then went on, were resighted, and we did the 25 models to determine survival of the species. From 8 to 12 weeks, it was determined that 80% of the birds do survive. And that's a really great figure to have for a critically at the time endangered population. However, we do know that on the nest site, survival on the nest is about 50% to ringing age. So this is probably due to the birds not being able to fly and being susceptible to predators on the ground. So we decided to also do a transmitter project, which would help us understand where the floater flock moved to. So the young birds, once they'd fledged from the nest, where did they go? And where were they foraging and how did they use the landscape? 5 trackers were put on chicks. 6 of these also grew into adults. So we got information later on. And 2 were placed on captive and released birds, birds that had been costume reared. And all of these were analyzed. This is the one of the birds that was a ring transmitter was placed on at ringing age. And you can see the bird was based in Nottingham Road, Midlands. And that big flight path was straight across between November and February, and where it stayed in Cedarville and then flew back again. And this gave us great insight to understand the flyways of this local regional migration. So in addition, and a lot of the work has been based on aerial surveys, and this has been vital for the long-term monitoring of the population within KZN. You can see on the left, there's 5 routes that we utilize between KZN Wildlife and Eskom and ourselves, and these are flown every year. There's routes and there's boxes where we check. In the last 3 years, we also additionally added an Eastern Cape route. This is primarily for grey-crowned cranes. But you can see from the graph that the population is fairly stable. But what you can see is that sometimes the floater flock, as the floater flock has got larger, the capturing of the floater flock on the aerial survey can be less reliable due to the movement of the birds that are not sedentary to the nest sites. So we can see over the long term that the population is increasing. And you can also see that the breeding pairs are increasing, which is fantastic news. But what we have noticed, and it could relate to those highly mobile younger birds that aren't breeding, this black line on the left graph shows that the increase is no longer statistically significant. And this could relate to the unpredictable nature of the moving birds, the floater flock, but it also may relate to a drop-off of increases because we've reached carrying capacity. On the right, you can see a graph where the nest sites, the former number of nest sites, was much higher. And although we've stopped the curve from declining, you can see we're starting to see a tip-off of some of those nest sites. And the largest number of nest sites we've counted on an aerial survey is 84. And we're really keen to get back just a few more nest sites. However, all this hard work from across numbers of organizations and the KZN Wildlife Provincial body, we have seen that there is definitely effectiveness in the conservation work we've been doing. And this, in 2024, the wattled crane was downlisted from critically endangered to endangered. But that primarily is from the halting of the decline in KZN. There is still a decline in Mpumalanga. But the population still remains incredibly small and vulnerable, and the captive insurance population is vital. But we can all celebrate that we have actually downlisted the species. So the conservation intervention measures that we feel are probably the most successful was the reduction of power line collisions and proactively putting power line markers around nest sites specifically. Improved breeding success through the protection of breeding sites, because wattled cranes breed in this landscape in South Africa in winter, and this is also burn season. And this is felt to be quite a big intervention. So what we do now is we work alongside farmers and landowners, and we try and remove the chicks or the eggs during a burn so that and then we release them afterwards, and the parents always go back to their chicks and eggs, and this has been quite successful. In addition, improving the placement of new power lines and protecting biodiversity through biodiversity stewardship sites and crane custodians is also believed to have raised the awareness of cranes and their value in the landscape. So where do we go from here? We've seen a downlisting, and we had another conservation planning meeting to try and understand what to do next. The declines are not happening in KZN, but like I mentioned earlier, we are seeing some anecdotal evidence that interspecific competition is occurring. On the population viability analysis, one of the key factors that we could observe is that carrying capacity of nest sites has in fact limited further increases in the population. And so this is a really important aspect of the work that we need to do. So from the tracking data, we've been analyzing different age groups in the KZN and Eastern Cape landscape. And you can see that before fledging, the birds are home ranges are very small around their wetlands. And as soon as they can fly, then they move quite large distances, but are only using small areas within the mosaic of the landscape that they utilize. So we next looked at the habitat and space use. What habitats were they using? Are they using? And we did a resource selection function, which indicated to us the preference that the birds have. This work is still going to be reanalyzed with a few more categorizations, but the initial results just show us just how dependent the wattled cranes are on wetlands. And you can see that from the right column. The cultivated areas are also utilized a great deal, and the grasslands are used as a control. The forested area just needs checking again for the adults because they're really not forest species. So some of this work will be reassessed. But the key takeaway from here is that all life stages are completely dependent on wetlands, not only for breeding, but also for roosting. And then we look again at the wattled crane movements. There used to be movement from Mpumalanga, and Mpumalanga does have a flurry of wetlands. And we conducted an ecological niche model, but when we conducted this model, there was not much showing for Mpumalanga of the numerous wetlands that are up there. And so we didn't think this ecological niche model was necessarily accurate. So what we've done to try and better understand the area in Mpumalanga is that we did an aerial survey of all the historically known nest sites. And we did that earlier this year. And unfortunately, of the numerous that were there, we've only found 3 pairs of breeding birds in Mpumalanga left. So we felt it was really important to understand the movement of these birds, these young birds, when they leave the nest site and start flying. So we did just put a ring transmitter on the first wattle crane chick in Mpumalanga. The bird is still being reared on the wetland, but we hope this bird is going to give us a few secrets and maybe even bring us to a floater flock where we can better understand the wetlands that they are using in Mpumalanga. So as you can see, that understanding wetlands will be really important to understanding expansion of the wattle cranes. So how are we going to conduct this? Some of the work we've been doing is using the drones to monitor cranes to better understand where we're getting losses. It's very difficult to monitor nest sites from the ground. We definitely get better results using a drone and understanding how many times these birds in the current status are recycling because their chicks fell very early on. The drones can also then be used for mapping wetlands. And through this, we hope to build a better picture of the characteristics of the wetlands that they're still using and how that might compare to Mpumalanga. But in addition to that, we also want to devise a measure, a rapid measure for measuring degradation of wetlands, where we know wattle cranes are occurring, and to ensure that we can act on the degradation of the wetlands that they utilize. So in short, we're going to be using a pest score system for measuring degradation of wetlands to try and prevent further restriction of breeding sites. We also want to understand the Mpumalanga wetland, the threats around those wetlands, and try and identify why the birds are not using them. We also need to characterize roost sites to help understand how movement could be in the landscape. And of course, one of the key aspects is to restore wetlands for breeding in KZN and in Mpumalanga. And that's the focus of our work today. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lara. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I hope the audience did as well. And I've learned a lot. I've come to realize that the crane age doesn't, like, they all depend on wetlands, and I think it's important that we all know, and each one of us can play a role in trying to protect these wetlands for our cranes. And I've learned the history. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, to begin with, I have a question, but I'll ask at the end. But then I've seen we have questions in the charts, and there's a question from Mweka from Tanzania. Boaz has asked a question. Boaz, do you want to unmute and ask your question, or should I read it for you? If you can unmute, please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes, go ahead. How is Mweka?
Yeah, we are really doing good, and thanks, Lara, for a good presentation. Yeah, following up my question, I was curious to know what has been like a collaborative effort for conservation of wattled crane, because as I mean, I saw from your presentation you had this map with the distribution across like southern part of Africa from Tanzania, Namibia, and a little bit from Ethiopia. So like because of interconnected habitats, you might find these species are moving freely. And so I wonder if there are like regional collaboration with the countries, like with the SADC kind of, because otherwise if efforts are only based in South Africa, then we might be losing species in other areas. So I was like, oh, like what has been happening? And especially I was thinking of like the experts, because the way you are doing it, it's like you are more specialized. And then I was wondering if there are other experts in other areas that are doing the same thing in order to like bring together the efforts in conservation of these cranes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
No,
have
great.
2 questions, but maybe after this one, I will take another.
Okay. No, they're great questions. So
Yeah.
at the moment, the South Central population, the International Crane Foundation Zambia team lead that. So we've been supporting as far as we are needed to support some of the skill sets in Botswana for Charles Mapufu, who's doing his PhD in Fitzpatrick, and then also working with the Kafui Flats and Zambia BirdLife. So there is connectivity there. The difference for us in South Africa is without the Mpumalanga population, it is highly unlikely that our wattle cranes are going to reach the South Central population. It is known and it is hypothesized, but not proven, that if the Mpumalanga population was healthy and present, then in theory, they could migrate up into Mozambique and into the Zambezi Delta. And it's possible that that's why the species here is genetically distinct, but not a subspecies, because formerly there was connectivity.
Yeah. Yeah, and the second one, I was wondering, like, because most of the habitat, as you showed from that box plot, like with different habitats and distribution, they are more distributed in wetlands because it's their favorite habitats. Then it comes a question of conflict because not all wetlands are protected, maybe in national parks or game reserves. Some of them are really found in like community lands. And so you might find we need to conserve, we need to do certain interventions, but the area is privately owned by someone and we might enter into conflicts like don't use fertilizers, don't do this kind of farming because it is harming the bird species. I was curious to know how it is the situation. Yeah.
So we have multiple teams. So I'm just the ecologist. So we have amazing senior community officer Samson Pakati, and he works within communal lands and rural communities. And then we also work alongside commercial farmers, but most farmers that understand that they have cranes are mostly keen to protect them. And in fact, the reason that the species has been downlisted is because of all that support from landowners and communities that make it possible for the birds to remain there.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you so much, Boaz, for the question, and thank you, Dr. Lara, for the answers. Yeah, so we're going to move on to the next question. The next question is from Dr. Tyler. Dr. Tyler is asking, will there be anyone delivering an address at the National Wetland in Indaba in late October at Gauteng? I hope I pronounced that city correctly, the province.
Yeah, as far as I know, not from the South African team, but maybe from some of the teams further up the country. I don't know of anyone from the South African team going.
All right. Thank you so much. And we have another question from Jess. Jess is saying, thank you. A couple of questions. Question number 1, what does their diet consist of? Wow, this is a good one. Yeah. What is the diet consist of?
So those long beaks and those long legs are specifically for wetland walking, and they are big probers and they probe into the soil and pick out roots, but then they are opportunistic and they will eat crabs and other insects that they come across, but primarily they're designed for a vegetarian diet, but they definitely rearing chicks in Nottingham Road, they will kill crabs, they will pick up the dried crabs that otters have eaten and use that for calcium. In fact, that's one of the calcium sources. So they can be quite diverse.
Thank you so much. The second question is, when do they reach breeding maturity and how long do they take to fledge?
That's really an interesting question, actually, because initially we used to think breeding age was only 7. But as the population has grown, we found that the birds are coming together earlier and breeding earlier than previously thought. So it could be an example of like just not having enough choice in the non-breeding population. But they have been primarily around 4 is an average now, whereas previously it was around 7.
Wow, this is very interesting because it's the same thing happening in human nowadays and it's happening in birds as well. That's quite very interesting. Yeah, all right. So I can see we no longer have some questions, but I have a question for you. Where does your passion for crane conservation?
Come from? So I think when I actually worked at Johannesburg Zoo, I was part of the team that were bringing in cranes to raise the ex situ population. And that became, I guess, a development and a passion for wattle cranes specifically. And then I was fortunate enough to um, also help with the KZN Crane Foundation, the development of the facility, and also then go on to do the first trials for birds running through that facility. And then I got a scholarship to do my PhD, so it kind of just became wattled crane.
Thanks, Laura. I'm jumping in with a question quickly. I wanted to ask you about other crane species and whether those crane species that might be, whether there are some cranes that overlap with the same ranges, and whether those crane species are also showing the same trends in population sizes under the same pressures. Yeah, just wanted to hear about that.
Yeah, no, great question. So definitely the Drakensberg area is globally a hotspot for cranes. So we have all 3 crane species in the Drakensberg area. And I think by protecting the wattle cranes and raising awareness for this former critically endangered species has definitely served to protect the grey crown cranes and the blue cranes, especially in the grasslands. We have seen on the aerial survey an increase in the last 10 years of 75% increase of blue cranes, which is great news. But unfortunately for the blue cranes, we have seen a decline in the Western Cape, which is where over 50% of the population lives. And because the blue cranes are indigenous to our country, it is a concern that we are actually just initiating a new blue crane project because previously there were numerous and a lot of birds, there was various threats to the blue cranes, including poisoning, and we are starting to see some of that poisoning occurring again. The grey crown cranes are highly resilient. We do see them a great deal and they're fairly widespread. So, but they are endangered on a global scale, but vulnerable in South Africa. And the reason they are endangered is because across the Africa, there'd been about an 80% decline of the species in about 40 years. But South Africa is doing pretty well with their grey crown cranes.
Thanks, Laura. There's just one more question in the chat before we move on to Bishop's talk. Just trying to get that. What are the biggest ongoing threats to the wattle crane in South Africa, and how are these being addressed at both community and governmental levels? By Sifa Jocelyn.
Okay, so we are hoping to do a 3 crane biodiversity management plan for the species. We're just waiting because grey crown cranes are an AOR species. We are just doing, I need to do a bit of a conservation plan for the grey crown cranes and then complete the conservation plan workshop from the wattle crane last year. The blue crane national meeting was also held last year, and then we hope to consolidate this work into a biodiversity management plan for South Africa. So that would hopefully provide some legal support for the work that we're doing. Did that answer everything?
Laura? Thanks, Laura. I do believe that my colleague Stella is back in again. Let me just see if she is here. Stella?
Hi, Kirsten. Yes, I can hear you. I'm here.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to Bishop's talk. Laura, thank you so much, and we'll probably bring you in again after Bishop's talk. But yeah, Stella, go for it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lara. That was a very fascinating talk. Now we are moving to our second speaker of the night, Bishop Ngoberi. Bishop Ngoberi is a dedicated champion of conservation and a key figure when it comes to urban greening initiatives. He has been instrumental in the Wattled Crane Recovery Programme, where they have spent years trying to arrange marriages for these birds so that they can have a breeding stock. So he's going to share with us the journey, the 20-year journey, how has it been and what have they succeeded up to now. So Bishop, welcome to the screen. The screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Stella, for the invitation. The work that Dr. Lara has done and the team from EWT is just immense. It's amazing work. So thank you so much. And as they've indicated, my name is Bishop Ngoberi from Johannesburg City Parks and Zoo. I'm the protected area senior manager. I credit most of this work to my colleague Hilton Nemtamfun, who's the facility manager at our research farm, where he's doing so much work, and also Grace Ndwane, who's our coordinator in terms of the Wattled Crane. So as I indicated, this work has been done for many years. I just came in and put so much effort to enhance the project so that we can be able to deliver the goal. This is just a description of the Wattled Crane, as they've also already indicated how Wattled Cranes looks like. This is our pairing facility at the our retail conservation and research farm. This is where our cranes pairing program, and I think Stella just said a nice word that we do arrange marriage for the cranes. So that's what we do. I'm not gonna dwell much on the description and how cranes are found. As Dr. Lara has already indicated, this is the map where you find cranes in Africa. The reason why these cranes are endangered is because of habitat loss. Dr. Lara indicated about the wetland degradation, coalition with power line, human disturbance in those nesting sites, poisoning, other illegal collection of chicks. So those has led so much into the decline of the Wattled Crane. As we are aware, Wattled Crane will sometimes they pair for life. They will lay 1 egg or 2 eggs. So this project that we have done, the Wattled Crane Recovery Programme, was to say, because the population in the wild is diminishing, or the population is going down, what do we do? So a project was put together to say, let's create something where we will be able to have an insurance in case if something happens in the wild, then we can be able to do something in captivity. So the goal of the project was we need to have 20 pairs of birds that are laying eggs, hatching eggs, and raising their own chicks, so that if something happens in the wild, we can be able to use these birds as an insurance. So that's what we have done, where we took these cranes and put them in captivity, where we use human influence. So what we do is, as Dr. Lara indicated, all these eggs that we collect from the wild, we go and select, this one is from this nest, this one is from this nest. Then we are able to pair them together, so that we can be able to have pairs that we want to have. This is where our farm is. It's based in the Free State, which is just 100 kilometers from Johannesburg, which is an ideal place for breeding of cranes because of there's no human disturbance. It's right at the World Heritage Site. As I said, the aim was to put this birds together so that we can be able to pair them. But there's a lot of work that you need to do when pairing cranes. Currently, we've got 52 cranes. They are in various areas. We've got most of the population is sitting at the farm. The National Zoological Garden, they've got some cranes. Our Joburg Zoo, they've got cranes. And we're starting now to look at bringing some of those birds that cannot breed so that we bring them into our urban area for education so that people can be able to see birds again in the wild. This is our pairing section where we pair our cranes. So most of them, we put nets around so that these birds, they don't fly out. So this is the layout of the crane. So basically, we put birds in one of these compartments, and then that's where we do our pairing, our matchmaking. If you look further on the that side next toward the mountain, you can see where we covered with curtains. That's where most of our pairing activities happens. Once the other birds that are not being paired, we have got an area where we put them. This is one of the facilities where we put those single birds. But in some of the areas, we put them together. So there are 4 stages that we use when we do pairing cranes. Stage 1 is the introduction stage, where we introduce birds next to each other. So we put, if you look at this picture here, we put one bird on the left, and we put another one on the right, so that they get to know each other and see each other. Then after that, we move to stage 2, where we create a contact, where birds are allowed to have contacts towards each other. Stage 3, where the female is allowed into that, and then camp. So this is the first one. Stage 1, you can see the other crane on the other side. One crane is on this side. So we create contact, but we cover so that they don't pay attention to another cranes. So we kind of like what Stella said, forced marriage. So we put them together so that they see each other, and they will start displaying a couple of synchronizing. Once they do that, we realize that no, these 2 birds like each other. Then we open for one to come closer to the other one, so that at least we create that contact. They will use different techniques, tossing of sticks, showing their feathers. So they will show that these birds they kind of like each other. And this is not just a small thing. For us to be able to pair these birds takes months and months and months, and takes a lot of dedication in terms of what are they doing, what display sites are they using. So a person who spent time here need to be so much dedicated and so much observant, so that they can be able to accurately give us right data. That's why I said the likes of Hilton, the likes of Given at the farm, they've done so much work because they've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours doing this. So after, when we realize, you know what, they like each other, then we open the enclosure and allow the female to go in, but we take her out until we're fully confident that, you know what, they like each other. Once they do that, then we leave them together, then they become a pair. And that's what we want to encourage, that once this is done, is now naturally, we allow them to breed and then lay eggs on their own and hatch their own chicks. So that's what we have potentially done for over years and years and years. All these birds, some of these birds were puppet raised, like Dr. Lara says, but some of them that were breeding at the farm were starting now to pair them together. We also look at what are the positive behavior when we are pairing. We look at dancing, calling, tossing sticks, close proximity, synchronized behavior. Those are the things that we look before we make a decision that these pairs will like each other. Negative, they do also show negative aggression. The moment they male might lose interest or female might lose interest, or they start fighting through the fence, or keeping away from each other. That's where we start realizing, you know what, these two birds they're not compatible for them to be paired. Then we move these birds and try another bird. So as I indicated, most of these need so much observation, and this is an amazing project for young students to be able to come work with us and understand this program. This is a pairing sheet where we look at this time, what were they doing, this time, what were they doing, and we put recommendations. So this is not something that you go in and spend 5 minutes and you go. You spend hours and hours and hours of collecting this data until we make a decision of pairing. We have managed to successfully pair around six pairs now, currently. Those are being paired. The first pair was paired in 2013. 2014, we had another pair, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019. So we put so much time putting these. Some of the pairs takes us almost 8 months, 10 months to a year. And just imagine every single day you go and collect this data and analyze it to see if they like each other. We also have a lot of single birds that we have at the farm, and we are trying to look at them, look at their parents, so that we don't want to create inbreeding around them when we do pairing. But most of these birds has been hatched in our captivity. Also, those ones that are paired, we also go in and see how they lay their eggs. You can see this bird Amazon. When it started, it was laying eggs on its own. Then we paired it with Josh, and they started laying eggs. We put Andre and Nompi, they started laying eggs, 2 eggs. Some of them, they become infertile eggs. Some of these pairs will lay eggs, but at the end of the day, you find that they don't produce any chick. So we also collect this data to understand which birds are laying eggs, which one are laying fertile eggs, which one are laying which eggs, so that at least we can be able to understand the pairs. You can see the other bird, Rebecca, she has been laying eggs, but she's not paired. So cranes will always do that, but those eggs becomes infertile and they will never produce any chick. So what we do with the newborn chick, the newborn chick is raised by the parents. Our first newborn chick, because this is research, this is learning every single day. When we had our first chick, we didn't know what was happening because most of the cranes that have been released or that has been hatched, they were raised by puppets. But we never, this was the first chick that was hatched. No one knew exactly how it will happen, how will the parents raise the chick. At an age of 5 months, 6 months, the parents kill the chick. And we went back to the drawing board because we're taking a lot of videos to say what might have happened. We picked up that that's the time where the parents will fly with the chick to the flutter flock in the wild, and they will leave that chick and go back to their nesting area. So which means we have to do something. So in the next time, then we were able to do something. So because these birds are in captivity, what we do is we create a diet meal that has been prescribed to say what is it that we need so that we can have these chicks to survive. So our first your day 1 and your day 7 is very, very critical stage because these chicks are very young. Then you need to give them mash, insects, and some grated vegetables. From day 7 to day 30, you give them a peasant breeder, insect, and grated vegetable. From day 30 to 4 months, you give them duck pellets, cream pellets, and chopped vegetables. At this stage now, they are able to feed themselves. This is one of our chick being raised by the parents. So the parents will tend to teach their chick on how to forage. That's even in the wild. That's what the parents will teach the young one in the wetlands. But because here it's not in the wetlands, it's in the captive area. The parents will tend to teach the chick how to search for food, how to eat, so that the chick doesn't die of hydration or doesn't die of not having food. So the parents will do everything to make sure that the chick understands the world around it, so that it can be able to survive in the world. You can see these are mealworms that the chick is eating, and the parents will constantly show its chick that to say, this is how you feed, this is how you survive in the world. So these are the survival instincts that the parents will be able to instill to the chick. Our chicks then start growing. So this one, you can see it has grown. This, I think it's run about 3 months. So the parents will continuously teach its chicks so that they can be able to forage in the wild. So what we also do, we also do a checklist on the chick to say how are they behaving. They be feeding, have they be drinking water, have been be foraging, what time it's resting, moving around. So we gather so much information so that we can be able to understand our chicks. Currently, we've got 15 chicks that have been hatched, raised by its parents in captivity. These chicks, there was never any human influence, but they were raised by their parents. So the biggest question that we have now is, we have managed to breed chicks, to pair cranes, let them breed, lay eggs, hatch their own chicks, raise their own chicks. After 5 months, then we separate the chicks into another compartment. What do we do with these chicks? Do you continue to breed and not understand that how will they behave if you move them into the wild? Or do you go in and say, let's make a test? Because if we continue to have these chicks, let's say, for example, we've got 15, in the next 3 years, we've got another 15 chicks, we'll have 30 chicks. Are we going to have a mini zoo of crane, or where we don't know whether these chicks can be able to survive in the world? With the work that Dr. Lara has done in terms of reintroduction, introducing chicks into the natural habitat, can we follow that in the wild and take some of these chicks, food transmitters, and release them in the wild through proper releasing programs? What do we do? Because at the end of the day, we cannot feed and breed and have so many cranes in captivity, not knowing whether these cranes will be able to survive in the world. So this is the question that we are having now, to say, from pairing to laying eggs, to hatching eggs, to raising their own chicks, these cranes in captivity, they've got that capability of doing that. But will these chicks that we're raising in captivity, will they be able to live in the wild? Because as Dr. Lara indicated, most of the bears that have been released, they have been released as part of using costumes, and some of them they've been hand-reared. The bears that we have right now, they have been raised by their own parents. Isn't it time now to go into those areas where we need to give a test to say, can captive bears that have been reared by their own parents, raised by their own parents, can they survive in the world? So that we can be able to say, yes, it's successful. Then now we can be able to put more effort into into pairing cranes in captivity, because we know that birds that are hatched and raised in captivity by their own parents can be able to live in the wild. So those are the questions that we're putting together to say, how do we now look at the areas that Dr. Lara has indicated, the Mpumalanga area, where there's a huge void? Do we go and assess that? What do we do? So the question is amongst us to say, we have the beds, we have the capability. Now is the time to have those discussions to say, what do we do with these beds? Do we continue to breed, not knowing whether they will survive? Because crane breeding is not something that you can do it in one day and get it right. This project has been there for many, many years. Now we're starting to see the breakthrough. But are we going to be able to say, if something happens in the wild today, if there's a catastrophe in the wild today, the insurance policy that we have, or the insurance policies that we have put at the Johannesburg City Parks and Zoo, can be able to be transferred back into the wild and become successful. So those are the questions that we are now working around to say, what do we do? Do we go back in the wild, release these birds, monitor them, and then learn more around them, so that we can be able to have a viable population in case something happens in the wild? We know that our insurance program that we have in captivity is ready to be released in the wild. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bishop Ngoberi. I should say this is a very interesting presentation. Like, I kept on asking myself questions, and someone in the chat read my mind. Sibaile read my mind. Sibaile Guzman. I was asking myself these questions. These belts are very complicated. How do they make decisions that I don't like this person or I like them? That's very interesting. And also, I would like to say that you have asked very important questions that are very important for us as conservationists to discuss and know the next steps. Yeah. So, all right, I will go to the charts now. Sibaire said what I've just said, that how do they know that I like someone or I don't like them? Any ideas on what is it that attracts them to each other or does not attract them to each other? So yeah, that's the question.
It's very difficult. I think Dr. Lara has done so much work on the grave, but I think it's just natural instinct. We put two birds next to each other, and first instance they like each other. They started tossing sticks together and everything, and all of a sudden you open the gate and let the female go in, then the male kills the female. So it's those it's because of the data that we collect and the amount of the time that the team that Hilton leads lead and given, that we are so much into detail on our data. So it's not something that someone will come in and observe this best today and tomorrow make a decision. As I said, for us to have one pair, it takes us almost a year or a year and a half. Just imagine every single day of collecting data, and all of a sudden on day 1 year, 2 months, all of a sudden the male just turn around and say that they don't like the female and they kill her. So for us, it's the data that we get. We see the dancing that they do, the affection that you see around it, and also it becomes it's part of the experience that the team that Hilton leads, that have got so much experience around crane pairing, because they can be able to pick up this data very quickly and say, you know what, here it's not going to work, here it's going to work. So yeah, it's very difficult, but the team has got so much experience to deal with it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bishop, and congratulations at least for having some pairing, because it's a lot of work indeed. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I've seen we have a question from Jess Babbitt. Would you please unmute and ask your question? if you can.
Hi, thank you so much for this wonderful talk. It's been fascinating. I just wanted to know, do you have other release or rewilding sites identified over and the ones that you are over and above the ones you're currently working with?
Okay, from Johannesburg City Parks and Zoo, we deal with the captive population. Dr. Lara and EWT, they deal with the wild population. For us, the project was, we need to make sure that we have got 20 pairs that are laying eggs, hatching eggs, and raising chicks on their own, so that if there's a catastrophe in the wild, we can be able to take these birds and then being able to rewild them back in the wild. So they now crossroad between the population in captivity and in the wild is to say, now we have got birds that are ready to be released in the wild. Do we go and look for these sites where, like, for example, Mpumalanga area, where there's only 3 pairs of pairs, and say, let's look at that? Or do you go into KZN and say, let's put a test around these captive birds, that's captive hatch birds, and see if they can be able to be rewarded and be part of the population in the wild? Because for us, we cannot keep on breeding and breeding and breeding if we don't know whether the birds that we have can be able to survive in the wild. So that's where we are kind of like in a crossroad to say, what do we do now? Because we have now achieved having pairs in the 6 pairs that are in captivity. They are laying eggs, they are hatching eggs, they are raising their chicks. What do we do with the chicks? Do we continue to pair them in captivity and create sort of a mini zoo of crane, or do we go and test in the wild to say these pairs or these birds can be able to survive in the wild? So the call is now in the teams that they are working in the natural area to say, what do we do with these birds that have been now properly hatched in captivity?
Thank you so much. I can see Jess has her thumb up. That means she's happy. All right, I can see we have a hand from Boaz Lawyer. Boaz, would you please unmute and ask your question?
Yep, thank you very much, Bishop Ngobeli, for a very wonderful presentation. I have 2 questions, one of which is like the marriage setting, like how do you define ethics when it's come to like pairing them for mate? Because these birds have their natural behavior, and when it comes to mate selection, it has to be like very natural without being forced, maybe put in a chamber. And of course, the concept of population, like how many birds do you have in a chamber so that they can be freely moving to search for a partner? So that was my first question. And the second one is maybe more general, and maybe Dr. Lara can help to answer, because I was wondering if there are any efforts on this we call OECMs, like other effective area-based conservation measures, of which they can help, of course, but I don't know how is it in terms of train themselves, because if we could be able to identify some areas outside of these protected areas that mostly managed by government, we can increase the area for having these cranes. Of course, following your question, like where these birds are going, but if we can identify these OECMs, it could be the added advantage. Like we know some areas, even though they are privately owned by some peoples, but they are somehow protected and managed for other purposes, but in turn they provide a suitable habitat for wattled crane. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of pairing, when we started because this was a learning curve for all of us. So we put them in the chamber, and then we learn how they dance, how they do everything. So the next step that our team is busy doing now, we are going to, in that chamber, that long chamber that I've shown you, we are going to put maybe males inside the captive area. In that open area, we are going to release the female birds, so that each now can be able to go and kind of like select its own partner right there. Or maybe we do vice versa. We put males in the chamber and let them select females. So those are the things that we want to now start looking at them to say, let's stop not just putting two birds next to each other and close off so that they can see each other. But because we've managed to get that right, to pay them, we get it right. Now the next step with the team that the team is doing now is to say, I'm going to put my single beds in different compartments, then let these other ones roam free in the middle and then choose their own partners. So, and also, we don't have much enclosures. So for us to build more enclosures, it costs a lot of money, but we've got enough enclosures now where we can be able to have 8 beds in those chambers, and in the middle we can have more beds, more either male or females in that chamber. So that's one thing that we want to go and learn on that concept. We have never done it, never been done, or maybe someone has done it, we don't know, but that's the thing that we want to do. We want to try to do more in captive breeding so that we can understand. There are some data that they have displaced in captivity that we don't know. We got these videos, we share with other teams and said, have you ever seen this? And said, we have never seen this. So there's so much work that is still needed to be done in captive population. But if you say, releasing them in the private areas, in the government areas, those are the things that we need to work with the team that Lara leads to say, now we've got these birds, can we now go and try to release them at these particular areas or these particular sites, so that at least we can be able to monitor and understand captive birds now in the wild area compared to understanding their display behavior in captivity, whereas it might be different in the wild. So those are the things that with cranes, to be honest, cranes are the most difficult species to pay. One of the persons that came to visit us from the International Crane Foundation, he said, I spent 54 years of my life trying to do this, Bishop. Do you want to follow that? Because this is the most difficult species to work on. But we are dedicated our time and our effort as a team to be able to do something around the conservation of the wattled crane in captivity.
Yeah, thanks. That was great.
Thank you so much, Bishop, for the answer, and Boaz for the question. I don't know if Dr. Rala would also like to comment on the second part.
Hi. Yeah, so a great question again, Boaz. So OECMs are still utilized as well as the biodiversity stewardship system. The problem we have with cranes is, by and large, the majority of the population does not live in nature reserves or protected environments. They live in a mosaic landscape, including agricultural wetlands that are either private or on communities. And so, although there are some breeding sites within protected environments, the majority are on commercial farmland. So OECMs we have looked at as an opportunity to protect specific nest sites, but it is a lot of work with, and there may be, we have explored different options, that there's different legal possibilities which private landowners may be more invested in doing than a full OECM, but it is something we're exploring in greater detail. In relation to possible sites for release, as I mentioned formerly, we're having anecdotal information suggesting that, and also by the modeling at the Wattled Crane PHVA last year, that we are at capacity in KZN, and so releasing wattled cranes into KZN is likely to not be ideal for the birds. And because we've seen such a decline in Mpumalanga, until we can identify the threats that are preventing the birds moving into that space, because I mean, there's just so many wetlands in Mpumalanga. The worry would be that you'd actually be releasing all that hard work and they would succumb quite quickly. We did have a rehab bird that we did release into Mpumalanga at the beginning of the year, and there's a lot of predators like caracal in certain areas, and that bird was released into Villerumflei which is a Ramsar site. It's a very protected area, and that also did not survive. And additionally, in the 1995 to the 2000 releases, the primary benefit, the best way to release those wattled cranes was into a floater flock, one bird into a floater flock. And so because we haven't found a floater flock in Mpumalanga yet, obviously further down the line, I mean, if these wattled crane chicks that we're putting transmitters on this year lead us to a floater flock in Mpumalanga, that would be fantastic. But for the successful release, based on the information we do know, the concern is that releasing a naive, but yes, parent-reared bird would, lead the bird to succumbing. But definitely, as we identify what perhaps the threats are in Mpumalanga, then I think going forward, those possibilities are around. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Oh, he has his thumbs up. That means he's happy. Thank you so much. All right. So there is a comment from Dr. Tyra. I don't know if he wants to jump in and say his thoughts.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Sorry. Look, my camera is on the blink, so I'll have to be on the dark side of the moon here. But anyway, yeah, I just find it curious that in the captive environment, with the whole process of introducing the birds together for successful breeding, there seems to be a trigger somewhere between the two birds on opposite sides of the fence that elicits the process which we would have as a recognition system in breeding, in successful breeding. I don't know if we know exactly what those triggers, those early cues, those early triggers are, because it appears that some birds might not be successful, so you'd separate them then, because they haven't done anything with respect to that whole process. But then in others it happens. So I don't know to what extent the whole process of their pairing has actually been really looked at very, very in great detail to see where are those initial cues? What are those initial cues? How early do they come before the whole specific mate recognition system with the stimulus response sets that will lead to successful breeding? It's just from that point of view, from that sort of behavioral point of view, that I'm quite curious.
To be honest with you, it's for us. Maybe it's because of when we put those birds together in those compartments, we look at the data where they come from. This one was second egg was collected from this net and this net, so we kind of like put them in a way that we don't encourage inbreeding. And I'd like to have a conversation with you, Doc, around looking at this parameter that you're talking about. Maybe invite you to the farm and have those one-on-one conversation when you see those birds, and maybe we can look at something. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a project manager, making sure that the effort of the way government has put so much effort in conserving this species in captivity, we kind of like direct it in the right way. And I would like to invite you, Doctor, for us to have conversation at the farm. If you are in the area in Johannesburg, we can travel together, so that we can have this conversation in the wild, where in the captive area, where we can now bring science, more of science into this, because for us, our objective was to look at those behavior, they like each other, and create those pairs that we wanted to do. But I think it's a fantastic opportunity to look now into more detail on science around wattled cranes in captivity.
Yeah, if I can respond to that. Yeah, okay, that'll be great. Just give me your details on the chat and I can talk to you a little bit further. But just in response to that as well, I'm not even sure if we'll be able to pick it up, because I'm not too sure how much we really know with respect to their specific mate or their mate recognition system. But it's just a curious thought. So maybe we could just discuss it for a while first, just to see if there's any reason that I might come through. Possibly, I'd love to, obviously. But let's have a look at that. Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you.
I think also
Thank you.
some of the team that are here that are interested to look at this journey. Your mother, I just put my information on the chat box. You can email me, and there are a lot of students here. So Dr. Ogilvy from TUT, one of my best friends. I think we can. There's so much available for us to learn here. And for my team that is sitting at the farm, that has and older guys that have been there, that they've been doing this without any reading any book, but just for instinct and knowledge that they have. I think it would be very nice to have scientists that are in this platform to come over and say, let's look at this, and also work with Dr. Lara in terms of habitat viability, those areas that she talks about, and said, what are the possibilities? Do we take two birds, put those transmitters, release them, look at them, understand their behavior? So there's so much to learn, and our farm is open as a research farm for you guys to come in and work with us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Bishop and Dr. Tyra. Yeah, okay, I can see we have another question from Sharon Lloyd. Sharon, if you're here and you'd like to unmute, you're welcome. Good evening, Sharon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. So I would like to know, do you have a possibility in the Western Cape wetland areas where these birds could be released? If Dr. Lara was saying that the Midlands, am I correct, is at capacity, so we can't release. In Mpumalanga, there's a problem with the numbers that they're not doing so well. Are there other areas, other provinces in the country where they could be released in wetland areas? Thank you.
I think Dr. Lara can come on this one in terms of release side, but from Johannesburg City Parks and Zoo side, we have birds that are ready. They just need to be climatized, and I think she understands the one population more than me. From our side, we do have birds that there might be a possibility of releasing, but it's up to them if that's a possible option.
Hi, thanks so much, Sharon, for your question. I was just actually looking at Paar de Valley in Somerset West. So I was just looking at the area, and if you just refer back to the movement of wattled cranes, and that movement, once the bird is fledged, was 100 kilometers squared. It does give you an idea of the landscape, especially in the Cape. And I'm just looking at the map here, that is a very built up area. So the Western Cape has been brought up as suggestions because historically, before perhaps quite so much development, the birds were found in that space. But I fear that much of that land has been built on now and no longer, although the wetlands are surviving for some species, I'm not sure it would suit the ecology of a wattled crane. And I just, while I'm here, I just see Jess has spoken, if that's okay, Salah. Jess has spoken about the Waterberg, and now Leslie. Nice, nice, Livy. I don't actually know those areas. I'm not sure. I think Waterberg is current. I do know that there's blue crane work going on up there. And so that would be more specific to the wattled crane than the wattled crane, the blue crane. There may be a release project forming in that area. The Karoo, Eleanor, stop firing all these areas at me.
So much possibilities, Dr. Lara.
No, the Karoo is way too dry for wattled cranes. Great for the blues, and even the blues are at risk in the Karoo. Understanding threats is super important, especially when people have put so much work into producing the birds that Bishop and his team have done. It's not something you want to rush into. So within the former, the translocation guidelines by the IUCN are quite clear on the reasons one should release and where they should release. And it would include former range and that there is enough space. So one of the reasons we were doing the transmitter work is to understand not just the chick range, but also how much the papers that were formerly done on the range of chick suggested a 16-kilometer square for the nest site, the young chicks, and we're seeing much smaller already. You know, birds obviously are not fenced in, so unlike your reserves where you can put a fence around and give some level of protection, birds just leave. And so you have to be very cognitive of the mosaic of the landscape around them. And there's a lot of groundwork that then has to happen in those spaces if you are to release. So absolutely, in the long run, but let's understand the threats. Let's check what is happening with the habitats, ensure there's availability of food. Formerly, there had been quite a lot of poisoning in Mpumalanga. So there's a lot of groundwork that has to happen first to be ethical for the birds that have been released.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Rara. And Jess has put in another comment.
Thanks,
Jess,
Jess.
if you'd like,
I have been in touch with them about the blue cranes. I think if it's the same people. I have recently been in touch with Ruben. Is it Ruben? Who was asking for advice about the blue cranes or just information. I'm not sure if it's the same place, but I can look it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love the discussion that has been going on, and I'm being tempted to invite you to bring them over to Malawi.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So I can see we no longer have questions, but if you have a question, please raise your virtual hand and I'll call upon you. But for the meantime, since I have the two of our speakers on the screen, I have a general question to you too. Where does your passion for crane come from?
I think that question should go to Hilton, but for me, I'm a nature conservationist, and species conservation is so important. We've seen with breed buffaloes, release them in the wild, all these that species are released in the wild. And I feel that there's so many unanswered questions around wattled crane, most especially from captive side. Dr. Larach is going to PhD on cranes that way, but I think I'm not scared to experiment. Yes, the welfare of our species is very, very important for us to preserve them. Until the day we release them in the wild, most especially the captive hedge birds, will be able to understand that other mystery that we don't know. Dr. Lara has released birds that are hedged through costume. You saw her wearing costume puppets, released them in the wild. We have never released one that has been hedged in captivity, raised by the parents. So for me, I think it's an opportunity for us to do that. That's where my passion grows from, to say, one day I would like to go into the wild and release that bird and spend another 6 months, 7 months with our team, with young students, following those birds, so that we understand the whole ecology of those birds that were hatched in captivity. Then that day we'll be able to say, captive birds can be able to survive in the world through this process. As today, I cannot say that, and I think because from my team we haven't done it, but until that day, I think that energy will be actually more and more seen than now.
Thank you so much, Bishop. I like your curiosity. Curiosity is very important in conservation. So thank you so much for that. And now let's move on to you, Dr. Lara. Where does your passion come from?
I think for me, wattled cranes, when I was working with them in captivity, were generally very hard. So I feel for the team and chuffed with the team and what they've achieved. They are not easy, and it's not just South Africa, it's around the globe. They are not straightforward species.
Yeah.
For me, a species that's critically endangered and has, it was one of the top 5 species that were critically endangered in South Africa. I think it's just an honor to be able to work with a species like that. And, it's had 30 years of conservationists like me. I mean, conservation isn't done by one person, it's done by lots of people and lots of stakeholders and people in the field. And, I love that kind of work. I love the people that love the cranes, and I love the cranes for themselves. So yeah, it is definitely just a passion to see them restored, to see everything restored. That is a passion. Restoration is my passion, I suppose.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lara. And I can hear it from the voice that you really want to do that. And congratulations, they have already moved from being critical endangered to endangered. So yeah, it's giving that it's happening. So that's a good thing. Yeah, thank you so much. So I can see lots of people are saying thank you in the chat. And I would also like to.
I would like to say we do need students to follow the birds we're tracking. Because we actually have to have people go and follow them when they're flying, and then we'll start to answer some of those questions that everyone is looking for. So.
All right. Yeah, I hope they have heard, all of you have heard. Thank you so much. And I would like to say thank you so much for your time to our 2 speakers. We have really enjoyed, and we have learned a lot from today's talk, and we really appreciate. And to our audience, thank you so much. And we hope to see you again on 2 October for the elephants. Thank you. Reaching this far, I would like to say good night to each one of you. In Chichewa, we say mugone bwino, usiku wa bwino. Good night.